It was a cold Tuesday afternoon, just a few days before Christmas, at a lonely gas station wrapped in flickering holiday lights. The kind of place where truck drivers warmed their hands around cheap coffee and bikers stopped to fuel up before riding through snowy highways. Jake Reaper Morrison was filling his Harley, the smell of pine-scented air fresheners mixing with gasoline, when a sharp scream cut through the quiet, full of pure fear, coming from the convenience store decorated with a small plastic Santa near the door. 20 years riding with the Devil's Brotherhood MC had trained Jake to know the difference between noise and real danger, and this was danger. He turned toward the store, his leather vest heavy with patches that usually made people nervous, when a little girl suddenly burst outside, running hard across the icy pavement. She couldn't have been more than 6, her blonde pigtails bouncing, cheeks red from the cold, and tears freezing on her face as she ran straight to him and grabbed his hand. Please, please act like you're my dad, she cried, her voice shaking as Christmas music played faintly behind her from inside the store. Jake froze, because in his whole life no one had ever looked at him like he was safety, especially not a child, yet she clung to him like he was the only thing standing between her and something terrible. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. A man stepped out of the store moments later, scanning the parking lot, looking normal in jeans and a polo, but with eyes so cold they didn't match the season at all. And the girl hid behind Jake's legs, whispering that the man was not her father and that he had taken her from the park while Christmas lights were being turned on. Jake didn't hesitate and placed himself between them, his broad frame blocking the man's path as the stranger forced a smile and called her Emily, asking her to come back. But Jake answered calmly, saying she was his niece and upset over candy, all while reading every movement the man made. When Jake quietly asked the girl if she knew him and she whispered no, the man's face hardened and his tone changed, telling Jake to stay out of it. And that was when Jake pulled out his phone and said he would call the police, causing the man to panic and reach into his jacket. Years of muscle memory took over as Jake grabbed his wrist and twisted, sending a phone clattering to the ground, its screen lighting up just long enough to show messages that made Jake's blood turn cold, talking about another child, her age, and a meeting planned for later that Christmas evening. Jake held the man tight, dialing not the police but his brothers, calling Bulldog and telling him to bring the crew to the Chevron on Highway 47 right now, because this was child trafficking and it couldn't wait, warning the man not to move unless he wanted his arm broken. Behind him, the girl cried softly, and Jake lowered his voice, asking her real name, learning it was Lily, and promising her that no one would ever hurt her again. Within minutes, the sound of roaring engines filled the frozen air as 7 Harleys rolled in like a storm. Men climbing off their bikes with hard faces and winter gloves. And when Bulldog saw the phone and the messages, the holiday cheer vanished from his eyes. Ghost confirmed quietly that the man was part of a network, dozens of kids over months, buyers and handlers meeting later that night. And Jake slammed the man against his truck, saying he didn't understand how monsters like him could exist, especially at Christmas, but he would make sure it ended. This time, though, it wasn't about quick revenge. It was about stopping every single one of them. And as Ghost traced the meeting location to an abandoned warehouse, Jake knelt beside Lily, listening as she explained how the man lied about her mother being hurt and locked her in his car until he stopped for gas, and under the glowing Christmas lights of that forgotten station. Jake knew this night was about to turn into something much bigger than a rescue, something that would bring justice. When it mattered most, Lily really was a smart and brave kid because she saved herself by running, and when Jake gently asked if she knew her mother's phone number, She said it perfectly despite still shaking from the cold Christmas air. Jake dialed, and a woman answered on the very first ring, her voice already breaking with fear. And when he told her this was Jake Morrison calling from a gas station on Highway 47 and that her daughter Lily was safe, the woman sobbed so hard he had to hold the phone away for a moment. She said the police told her she had to wait, but a mother's heart knew something was wrong. And Jake calmly explained that the man who took Lily was being held and that she needed to call Detective Sarah Martinez from the state police and tell her Jake from the Devil's Brotherhood was asking for her to come out, assuring her that despite the club's reputation, right now they were on the right side of this. Snow began to fall lightly as Detective Martinez arrived about 40 minutes later with state police units. Her breath fogging in the cold as she greeted Jake by his road name and listened while he handed over the phone Ghost had unlocked, filled with messages that grew darker the more she scrolled. Enough evidence for multiple warrants and a major Christmas week operation. When she asked how Jake got involved, he simply said the kid asked him to pretend to be her dad. And moments later, Lily's mother arrived, dropping to her knees in the parking lot as Lily ran into her arms under blinking holiday lights. And before leaving, Lily turned back and thanked Jake, cracking something open in his chest that 20 years of rough living never had. As Martinez organized a raid on the warehouse meeting scheduled that night, Jake insisted on being there because if nobody showed up, the traffickers would scatter, and bikers showing up late to a shady deal during the holidays wouldn't raise suspicion. So unofficially and off the record, Martinez agreed. The abandoned warehouse they rode to looked like something straight out of a winter nightmare, cold, broken, and rotten. And inside, Jake saw 12 children huddled together, some crying softly, some too exhausted to make a sound, and the word merchandise made his stomach turn as he secretly hit the signal on his phone. When the traffickers realized too late who they were dealing with, state police stormed the building in seconds, and Jake knelt in front of the kids, telling them they were safe and going home for Christmas, answering a little boy's question about whether he was a bad guy with a quiet promise that not tonight. The aftermath was controlled chaos, EMTs, social workers, and tearful reunions, and Detective Martinez later thanked Jake, admitting she'd spent years chasing his club, but that this time they helped take down a massive trafficking ring, asking him not to make her regret it. That night at the Devil's Brotherhood clubhouse, decorated with a crooked Christmas wreath on the door, Jake stood before his brothers and told them there was no going back to pretending this didn't change them, that children were off limits forever, and that anyone who crossed that line was declaring war on the Brotherhood. Not every hand went up, but enough did, including Bulldog, who admitted he'd lost a niece years ago. And from that night on, things were different. Over the following months, calls came in, tips were followed, kids were found, families were reunited before another Christmas could be ruined. And 6 months later, Jake sat in a community center the club helped rebuild, watching kids laugh while Lily ran up and hugged him again. The club still rode, still lived in the gray, but now they had a code written in action, and Jake often thought back to that cold gas station, to a scared little girl asking him to be her dad for a moment, realizing that redemption wasn't erasing the past, but choosing to protect the future, especially when it mattered most during a season meant for light, warmth, and second chances. Cole cleared his throat and said calmly that before anything moved forward, he needed to check the room, blaming it on protocol after recent Christmas week trouble. And even though everyone knew it wasn't normal, no one argued as holiday tension already hung heavy in the air. Danny swept the room with a detector while faint Christmas lights blinked outside the warehouse windows. And within minutes, they found a hidden recording device taped under the table and 3 unregistered guns stuffed inside a duffel bag. Draining the color from Trevor's face and freezing the others in silence. Cole stood slowly, his voice low and deadly as he warned that anyone trying to set him up in his own territory would not only lose business, but disappear into the desert before Christmas morning. And without another word, he thanked Sarah out loud, so everyone could hear, and walked out. Back at the clubhouse, glowing with neon lights and decorated with a dusty wreath over the door, Sarah finally exhaled, replaying everything in her head as Cole admitted she hadn't just watched. She had seen what others missed, and outside in the cold desert night, she realized she was no longer just a bystander. The clubhouse felt heavier after dark, smelling of oil, whiskey, and old memories, and Sarah sat at the bar, untouched water in her hands while Cole joined her, admitting the recorder had saved his life because Trevor had planned to provoke and kill him, then claimed self-defense, but now the balance had shifted. The next morning, back at Rusty's diner with Christmas decorations taped to the walls, Sarah spotted a man who didn't belong, sitting too long, ordering nothing, watching his phone, and trusting her instincts. She called Cole, leading to Danny confirming the man was a private investigator hired not by Trevor, but by a cartel lawyer, which meant something much bigger was unfolding. 2 nights later, as Sarah closed the diner and the lights suddenly cut out, Trevor appeared from the shadows and warned her to walk away before the coming war swallowed her whole. But instead of running, she called Cole immediately. In his office, surrounded by old photos and fallen brothers, Sarah admitted she was scared but done being invisible. And when Cole warned her there was no easy exit from this life, she asked him to teach her how to survive it. Over the following weeks leading into Christmas, Sarah trained relentlessly, learning weapons, surveillance, and how to read danger, shedding fear and gaining purpose, until the Vipers finally struck, torching bikes and attacking Cole's operations. While war loomed, Sarah proposed something smarter, exposing them instead, and by tracking meetings and planting a wire during a motel meeting dressed as a cleaner, she captured proof of cartel money and plans to take over the entire region. Cole handed everything to federal authorities, and just before Christmas, Trevor and his allies were arrested without a single shot fired. Months later, as winter eased and life slowed, Sarah stood behind the diner counter pouring coffee like always while Cole sat quietly, both knowing that one decision, one night, had changed everything. The desert wind still whispered outside, the neon signs still buzzed, but Sarah Bennett was no longer unseen, and during a season meant for light and truth that made all the difference.